What is it like to be an independent?
Oh my gosh, well, I just started my role as an independent, it's been just over a week. And so far I have to say that it feels really good. One of the things that's really a benefit to me being an independent now is that I'm not beholden to any kind of ideology that has to do with any party. So I don't have to really be politically partisan. I can look at every issue from the point of view of the benefit to the community that I represent. And it gives me more freedom actually to speak on issues and to truly and independently represent the people of Cloverdale, and that's the benefit of it. There's downsides to being an independent, which is that in British Columbia, rarely have independents been elected for more than one term. That being said, it's my second term being elected, and I think that being independent makes me even more motivated, knowing the difficulty of re-election, more motivated to make an impact over the next 3 years.
What drew you to become an MLA? Because you were an RCMP officer for some time, and then you were also in the Royal Canadian Air Force before that.
Yeah, well, mostly it was my experience policing and some of the problems that I was encountering on the street dealing with as a police officer and seeing my fellow officers. And it really surrounded the lack of supports for people with mental illness and addictions issues. And I wanted to be able to go and advocate for improvements to those services, which I've done over the last 3 years. And then additionally, one of the things that motivated me was, especially after the death of George Floyd in the United States, there was a real turn against police, especially when police are dealing with people with mental illness. And I think that, police would also largely agree that the most appropriate way in dealing with people and helping people with mental illness is that to be through healthcare. And so I wanted to go and bring my perspective as a former police officer into the conversations we have in the legislature so that I could help communicate that the best way to keep people from getting hurt in a crisis, hurt dealing with police when they're in a mental health emergency, is to make sure we prevent those interactions by giving them the proper treatment they need before it gets that far. So that was my motivation, really. And I think the province in the last 3 years has come a long way. I'm very proud of the advocacy that I did in that regard, and it's one of my passions, and it's something that I probably am an aspect I'm the most proud of in the work I've done so far.
Do you think you'll work more with other parties or?
Actually, the one thing is when you're an independent, every seat in the legislature is precious because every single vote obviously is important to either passing legislation or making sure that legislation that isn't quite ready for prime time doesn't make it across, the threshold. And because the government has only a 1-seat majority at this point, they really are reliant on the vote of the speaker to pass legislation. But that's not a very good look for government if everything it does, it's forcing through, by one vote only. And so I think that the government is much more likely to take a collaborative stance and listen to, for example, they have a working agreement with the Green Party, right? And likewise, listening maybe to the voice of Cloverdale. And that being said, even when I was with the Conservative Party of British Columbia, I actually had my private members bill turn into policy. So I introduced, as an opposition member, legislation to strengthen communication for families whose loved one is apprehended under the Mental Health Act. After Lapu Lapu happened, I went to the minister. We developed an agreement that I would withdraw my bill in exchange for them creating an immediate policy to help strengthen that relationship to improve care for people who are mentally ill. So even in the official opposition party, I still was very collaborative if I could be. And my intention is to stay that way. If there's something that I think could help people in the near term, like as soon as possible, make a change to help people in Cloverdale and in all of Surrey and BC, then I would not wait for some election to come to try to change the whole government, but maybe I can help this government to make a change that benefits the community, and that's what I'll do.
Think back to this one. What did the caucus meetings feel like when you were in them?
Oh, caucus meetings, it depends. Yeah, it's a good question, but it depends, because like caucus meetings can be, it depends on what the subject matter is that we're talking about. The point of having a private caucus meeting is that if various members of a party want to have a discussion or air disagreements, for example, about policies or platform ideas, that's the place to do it, instead of having a public giant discussion. Like I'm sure Premier Eby he doesn't want his MLAs fighting about legislation in public. You have those discussions and debates inside your private caucus meeting. So they can be like really interesting, because particularly in a party like the Conservatives of BC, where you have people who are more in the center, and then you have people who are further from the center. I mean, obviously perspectives are going to be really, really different. And that's one of the challenges. And even, I guess, on the left side of sort of the political spectrum, you're going to have people with varying degrees of, political ideology. And the key is bringing people together on the things that matter the most. So I've had everything from completely amazing caucus meetings to one where there was a lot of division in a caucus meeting. But even division doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It just means that there's a lot of perspectives. So, and now I'm just a caucus of one. So there better not be any division.
When you heard that BC United was stepping out of the race in support of the Conservatives, what was your reaction when you found out?
Well, to be honest, so I was watching television when Kevin Falcon made his announcement, and I felt a lot of empathy for Kevin, because that was probably an extremely difficult thing. So I was disappointed that it had to take so long for that. I had wished, actually, even before I crossed the floor, that we had formed maybe an electoral alliance, or somehow our parties could have worked together at that time. And so I was sad to see that it had stretched out so long. And I also felt, compassion for Kevin Falcon, because I can't imagine what it was like for him. I've had to face the media in difficult and challenging times, but he had a lot on his shoulders, and so I have a lot of kind feelings for, obviously he went through something that was really hard. And people might think I was like, yes, now we're just, but you know what? I knew that it would be challenging from that point forward regardless. And I felt that the compassion for the man that had been leading the party that actually helped me get elected the first time. So.
What made you switch to the Conservatives?
I wanted to be able to, I could sort of see the future, I guess. Not that I had a crystal ball or anything like that, but, the momentum was, the Conservatives at the time in Canada, the momentum was building behind Conservatives. A split on the right of center vote would guarantee that the NDP would win again. Because of policies that I'm absolutely not in favor of, and in terms of the way that law and order in the province had been going, and resistance in previous years. Now the government is totally for bail reform, but they were not for bail reform in 2022 and even most of 2023. Only when some pretty serious incidents happened did they finally relent. And so I wanted to be able to form a government so that policy changes could happen. Guaranteed, for example, the unwitnessed safe supply would stop if I was the minister. It took so much work to make that happen. Someone had to literally leak a government report before they even admitted it was real. So anyway, that all being said, I wanted to try to do what I could in my strength to make sure that there was a single party right of center. And because BC United didn't have the momentum anymore, it was declining, I thought the best option would be to go with the Conservatives, who had recruited me with saying that their intention was to broaden the tent, to broaden the spectrum of support by having people who are in the center as well as people further from the center working together to get those center votes. So yeah, my choice was to do that so that I could help coalesce support behind the stronger party for the best opportunity to win. We came close.
What does an everyday life look like to be an MLA?
Yeah, it's every day is different. So, yesterday was an extremely busy day for me. Since I am an independent now, I have a budget that was allocated to my previous party becomes my budget. So everything from working with my staff to get the new people hired, because I had to hire some new staff to help me in the ledge, to I wrote a news release which went out this morning. Today I had a media interview, and you're here visiting me, right? I meet with constituents who have problems that they need help with provincial stuff. So it can really vary, but the most important thing that I do isn't question period, and it's not media interviews. It's when people come to this office, maybe we've had people who've had legs and arms and stuff cut off in car accidents, and they have trouble navigating ICBC. So my staff helps them, or we've had cancer patients who needed help making sure that they could get surgery because their waiting list was beyond what the expectation of their life was. And so these things that people don't see on the news is actually the most important part of an MLA's job, is making sure people who live around here can get help if they need it. And then, of course, then the icing on the cake and the fun part is when I can take those kind of advocacy and battles to the media and to the question period. But so it really varies. Can be a day where I'm like, I'll tell Sam here, I need a day off, don't book anything, and then I'll spend a day with my family. Otherwise, I could literally work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because the need in the community never ends, and there's so many things that need advocacy, from the deficit, and the provincial budget is really out of whack, to lack of daycare spaces for people. Surrey School District having some issues with lack of classroom spaces and having canceled programs last year that are not being restored. So there's a never-ending list of things that I could work on, that's for sure.
Based off of what we've been seeing in the news, the Conservatives had 40 or 41 seats after the election. Now they're down to 37, I believe. Is them coming to opposition party too quickly a bad thing, or? No, so it's a very complex issue, I guess, but what I would say is that, the leader of the opposition's job is to make sure, and the reason why I crossed over to work with him in the legislature was to bring people right of center together to work on key issues like the economy, healthcare, public safety, to make BC more livable, affordable, and safe. Unfortunately, I would say that the leadership within the party was not enough to make sure that people were successful working together. And so yes, what started off as 41 seats is now 4 less seats, which I think is not necessarily an indication that the party went from very low support to the official opposition. It's a reflection of the leadership of the individual who's meant to keep the team together.
That was all the questions I have.
Okay, great.